How you doing tonight, IB Nation Sports Talk? We are up. We are rolling. Jesse Stiers is going to be with me in a little bit. I'm, of course, Sean Stiers as we start today's show. It is Tuesday, and what we've got coming up is a North Carolina State insider interview. We're going to be doing that first. After that, Jesse's breaking out the whiteboard. I know everyone's going to be excited about that. He's got the whiteboard. And he's going to do something that I think we're going to make a regular segment of the Tuesday show. The best thing we saw from the previous week's game. So Jesse will be doing that after the NC State Insider interview. And then after that, we've got Rapid Fire. So we've got a lot coming up for you. We've got the NC State Insider interview coming up first. No Irish 17, not a solo Stiers show. It'll be me solo doing the interview here in just a second. We did have to record it yesterday because schedules and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing I can do about it. I always try to get our guests to come on live as much as possible. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case, it didn't. So we did have to record it. So we've got the NC State Insider interview. After that, Jesse will be with me and we'll do the whiteboard. And then after that, we've got rapid fire. We'll talk about where Notre Dame is in the polls this week. We've got some Sam Hartman conversation. We'll talk a little Duke. We'll talk a little Clemson. We'll talk a little LSU, I believe, Florida State, some of the teams, the top 25 this week. So we've got a lot coming up over the course of this show. So let's just jump into it right now, starting with, if I can, there we go, if I can find the right thing up here on my screen. Let's just jump into the interview. We are glad to welcome to the show Jadyn Watson from the News and Observer in North Carolina. Jadyn, I saw as I was kind of looking you up and checking things out a little bit. It looks like you kind of hit the ground running on this NC State beat. Just got in there just in time for the season to start, huh? How's it going?
It's a lot. I started the interview process a while ago, but because of just like corporate stuff and all of the bureaucratic stuff like above the newsroom, it took a lot longer to get in than we'd wanted. And then by the time it finally happened, I was like, well, I have 2 weeks left on my lease, and I really don't know that I can get packed up in 2 weeks. And so I was like, well, I guess we could do a 3-month lease and kind of just like leave a few weeks before that's up. Obviously, I've posted about it, but my sister got married in August and she came up to Denver for the Taylor Swift concert. So I was like, I guess I could somehow I was like, I guess I could leave my husband in Colorado and he could pack up the house. Although based on our moving experience, that would not have been a good idea.
Yeah.
So thankfully they were like, well, we've waited already. So, let's just push it out. And it was fine. But yeah, it was definitely just there you go.
Your husband made the trip though. He's with you in North Carolina.
He is alive.
Okay.
And well.
Good news. Well, your season got started, last Thursday, I guess. Yeah. North Carolina State season got started last Thursday. Your first game there on that beat. They opened against UConn. Yeah. What maybe were some of the biggest things or the biggest thing that you were hoping to learn about that team coming in and out of that game?
I think I just wanted to see where they were strong and where they were weak. I feel like this is a team that people have talked about for a long time. It's a state school, one of the flagship universities in North Carolina. And so they may not be in a conversation for a national championship but whether they're a top 25 team, that's something you kind of hear about a lot regardless. And so I was like, well, we'll see how they do. They were supposed to be super great last year. Even covering the FCS, I was like, I was hearing stuff. And I think we all knew how the season ended. It was, I'm sure they would say it was disappointing. It wasn't a bad season, but it wasn't a great season. And so they're like, well, we lost all these guys, but we brought new ones in. And so for me, being new, I was like, are they living up to some of the expectations? And to be fair, those expectations are lower this year, at least externally. But I was like, who are these guys? Who are the stars? Did they play like stars? And who are some of these younger guys who are supposed to step up, and do they step up? So it was really a big picture thing for me.
That's interesting. You say the expectations are lower, because I think when we sort of look at this matchup from this side, especially, you've got Brennan Armstrong. Notre Dame played Virginia a couple of years ago. Armstrong missed that game due to injury, and that was the big question going into that game. What was Brennan Armstrong going to play, or wasn't he? Because he felt like a game-changing type guy, and he's paired up with Robert Anae, who of course was his offensive coordinator out there at Virginia. So when you look at those two, especially, how important do you see that pairing of those two being together in this offense this year?
I think it is important, especially when you have a senior QB with someone he's comfortable with and he's had success with. Obviously, the system is going to be different, but Dave Doran has kind of let Robert and I do his thing, kind of implement things how he wants. There's not a ton of micromanaging. And from game one, I liked how they let Brennan Armstrong just kind of play through some scenarios. Not everything was scripted. And I think that's important, because when you get into some of these games, you may think, oh, this is exactly how Notre Dame is going to play. This is what their game plan is. Sometimes it's totally different, and having someone who can think on his feet, and having a coordinator who can make adjustments or trust the players to make said adjustments is important. And I was impressed personally to see Armstrong kind of get his way out of tricky situations. There were a couple of plays where I was like, oh, this dude is definitely getting sacked. But he was able to scramble out and either get a first down or, positive yardage. And I think that's important.
They ran for over 200 yards in that UConn game, and he had almost half of it. He had 94, 95 yards, I think, rushing in that game, and a couple of touchdowns as well. Is he pretty much the running game for North Carolina State, at least coming out of one game?
Coming out of game one, yes. I know they have some guys who, in theory, should be able to back them up, but at least in that specific situation, he was their guy. And I don't know yet, because it's so early, and because I'm so new to watching them in depth, I don't know that there's necessarily a weakness at running back, as much as I think he's just so versatile and so dynamic that sometimes it just makes sense for him to just take off instead of trying to find someone else.
Marcus you talked about the running backs there. Marcus Freeman was really complimentary on Monday of North Carolina State's receivers. And you look at their passing game in that game, it didn't look like it was very downfield. It was like 9.1 yards per reception was the average that they had in that game. So how would you describe what you saw from that passing game? What did you think of what you saw?
I was a little disappointed as my initial reaction, mostly because everyone hyped up the Nye Armstrong passing game.
Mm-hmm.
I still think there's room for them to be great, but I also think there's a little bit in terms of what they have in the receiver room. I think there might not be as much depth and experience as people maybe want or expected. I'm trying to find the depth chart for this week because I saw it and now I can't even remember. But like Casey Concepcion, he's a true freshman.
Right.
He played pretty well against UConn, but when you are relying on some underclassmen, there are going to be mistakes. There are going to be guys who just haven't played in some of the big moments yet, and I think we've yet to see kind of where their potential is.
When I looked, I saw part of that game Thursday, and then you look at the final score, 24-14, and I've got it recorded. I've still got to kind of go back this week and kind of watch some more, but it was a little closer, I think, than most people would, especially when you look at, again, like that Nye Armstrong and kind of hearing what we've heard of this North Carolina State offense versus UConn, which was better last year, but is still UConn football. What did you think? Was the end result closer than you thought it was probably going to be?
Truthfully, no, because
okay.
Okay, I am coming from the Big Sky where if there's not a lot of scoring in general. So that's like what I've been accustomed to for 4 years. So I honestly was like, oh yeah, like 20, 30 something to 10, 15. I'm like, that totally seems normal, even with the hype around the offense. And because I knew that they'd lost so many guys on the defensive side, I wasn't fully confident that they'd be able to just completely run over UConn and then have the offense take over. And I was right on in that respect. So I'm not surprised. And I don't know if that, again, I think maybe that might have been just my personal experiences. Because I didn't go into it thinking, oh yeah, this is totally going to be like a 40, 50 point game.
Well, you mentioned their defense. They were a pretty good defensive team last year, but they did lose some guys, as you mentioned, and they looked like up and down a bit in pass coverage against the Huskies, especially as you look at this matchup with Notre Dame, where you've got Sam Hartman, who's granted against lesser competition, but still throwing the ball all over the place. He's got receivers and weapons all over the place. That is, if you're North Carolina State, how concerned are you about that this weekend?
I actually thought they were okay in the pass rush. It was the run game that was the bigger problem. There were more, I think there was more blown coverage on the ground than reverse because they gave up the 71-yard rushing touchdown. My cat wants to go outside. Apologies. And I mean, you have defenders going after him, but half of them are falling on their faces and can't remotely keep up. And that was on one play. So you had a couple instances of that. And truthfully, I think that's going to be the bigger test than the passing game. I think they are capable of it. And it's just settling in. I think they were a little jittery, a little bit all over the place on the first drive, but I think if they're locked in and they don't come into this game with a bunch of hype, that they should be okay and they should be able to keep things at least under control.
They had a safety, Raheem Ashford, who was injured in last week's game. What's his status as of right now?
He's great.
Okay.
He will play football again. He may only be out a week. It looked really scary, but he passed all of the tests. They kept him in the hospital overnight. He flew home the day after. He was actually on my flight back here, and I could see him moving his head, moving his body, fine motor skills seem to be intact. So Dave Doran said he's not certain on the recovery time, but it could be as little as 1 week. They're just kind of day-to-day thing.
What about Savion Jackson, the defensive end? He missed last week's game.
He's on the depth chart, and they said that they're hoping to have him back for Saturday. So we shall see. Your guess is as good as mine, truthfully.
It's pretty rare that Notre Dame comes to NC State. It's been a few years since Notre Dame has been out there. Is this pretty highly anticipated in that area?
From what I can tell, yes. People are not super happy that it's a noon kick, which I get it, but I'm also coming from Oklahoma that has 11 a.m. kicks till Kingdom
That's
Come.
True.
So I'm like, noon, y'all got a whole extra hour. But no, it sounds like people are excited. It's the home opener. I really think it'll be a fun environment. I think the Irish are going to have fun regardless of the outcome. I think it'll be a good college football Saturday.
You touched on Dave Doran a little bit. This is season number 11. He's a pretty highly respected guy. I think they've been to 8 bowl games in his 11 years out there. So, by North Carolina State standards, I think he's been fairly successful from what you have gathered in your relatively brief amount of time out there. Are folks like you mentioned expectations? What are the expectations for this year / going forward for Dave Doran, a guy who's been there for a while, but have they kind of hit their ceiling, I guess, under Dave Doran?
I don't know that they've hit their ceiling or not. I will be the first one to say that I don't know enough to say whether or not they have. However, there are people who are not particularly pleased. They want 10, 11 win season. They want to be in the national conversation for a playoff spot, especially once, with all the expansion talk and everything, it would be a big deal. And I think until they get to that point, there are going to be people who aren't happy because they've had a lot of pretty good seasons, but not great seasons.
Right.
And there is also a fly around here. So sorry, future viewers. Yeah, I really don't know, and I'll admit that because I'd like to think that they've got more in the tank, but some people around here are not convinced.
Well, it's got to be tough, I think, just where they are right now, considering you've got Mac Brown and Drake, all this stuff going on, obviously not very far away at their biggest rival at North Carolina, and Duke was better last year in Mike Elko's first year. So really, it seems like that kind of has the potential to sort of, they did beat North Carolina last year, but it still kind of jacks up, I think, the expectations for everyone when you've got all three of those programs doing fairly well at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. I think people look at North Carolina and think, okay, well, why isn't state there too? It's a very similar dynamic to Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, I think, in terms of the
big brother, step brother kind of.
Yeah, and the fan mindset. Within the program, I don't get that vibe so much, but outside, there's definitely this comparison. And it's, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It really is kind of weird to me. But I don't know. Again, I'm coming from a team that has had 2 winning seasons since it joined D1 in 2006, and won 6 games over the last 2 seasons. So an 8-5 season sounds amazing to me.
It's all perspective, right?
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It seems pretty good.
We're also talking to you just a few days after the Cal, Stanford, SMU stuff. The vote went through, and they're obviously going to be joining next year. So I'm curious, being in the heart of ACC country, what's been sort of the immediate response to that? Is anybody excited about it at all?
I think people might say they're excited in terms of like university leadership. Are they actually excited? I don't know, because all of the fan talk I've heard is very negative. I personally don't understand it. I think it would have been better to wait. Listen, I know the Pac-12 has completely crumbled and it's a shell of itself now. Mm-hmm. But I'm sorry, but not sorry. You're adding Cal and Stanford for one, and then SMU for two. Like, it just doesn't make logistical sense for any of them.
Right.
And so that's something that's been pointed out over and over again was I don't know that the money is worth it. I don't know, especially for smaller sports. How are we going to actually make this work? Football, yes. Dave Doran said today, he's like, honestly, it's not a big deal to me. We'll go out there maybe, once every other year. That's all fine and good. But you're really telling me like the volleyball team, the soccer teams, like they're going to make those trips regularly. And on the flip side, like Cal and Stanford and SMU are going to make those trips out here all the time. I don't know. That's some hard stuff.
I agree. I think a lot of people agree with that, but it's been punched through, and as we know, apparently Notre Dame was kind of leading that charge to punch it through. So I guess we'll see where it goes.
I don't know. I wash my hands of the situation. It's way above my pay grade. Yep. I'm just here.
A lot of long flights to and from. I think everybody sees that coming. Jadyn Fisher-Watson from the News and Observer covering North Carolina State. You can read her stuff there, newsandobserver.com, if I remember right. Does that sound right? Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. We appreciate your time. Have a great time out there. Hopefully, the last time Notre Dame was out there, it was hurricane weather. I don't think we're going to get that this weekend.
I think it's going to be really, really hot.
All right. We'll take really, really hot over pouring down hurricane rain. Yeah. Thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
The old mute button was on. There we go. Pre-recorded interview with Jadyn there, and Jesse has brought his whiteboard with him tonight. So we're going to do a little bit of whiteboard. I believe there were a couple questions that came up, a couple of different things I wanted to get to real quick. Brent Smith asked, what is Drake Bowen's status? I think it was answered in the chat. Marcus Freeman said yesterday that he is expected to play this weekend, or at least be available to play this weekend against North Carolina State. And there was a question that I asked her, one of the injury questions. Rakeem Ashford, the safety, and when we recorded this, I believe before Dave Doran made the announcement that Ashford, the safety who was injured against UConn, is not going to be available for North Carolina State this weekend against Notre Dame. So Ashford is expected to be out. Drake Bowen for Notre Dame is expected to be available after missing last week. How you doing today, Jess?
I'm doing well. It's an easy Tuesday of work. Didn't have to work Monday, unlike the rest of Irish Breakdown. Yesterday was a clean day off for me, and this is my first time looking at myself on camera. It looks like I got a little sun this weekend, so I am pleased all around right now. I've come back refreshed. I was able to watch majority of the Notre Dame game. I won't lie. Once the third strings kind of made their way in, that's kind of when my my interest started to part, and I had
And your day ended.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had Labor Day weekend obligations of camping and seeing the girlfriend's family and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good to see Notre Dame take care of business early against Tennessee State, and I think that's something that we haven't seen. I can't tell you the last time I saw that in back-to-back weeks. Blowout type victories. Notre Dame would sneak one in here
Especially
and there.
to open the season.
Over the past couple of seasons, but back-to-back victories like this has me buzzing. And I texted you earlier today for all the listeners too. If I were everyone in here, I would hammer that Notre Dame spread against North Carolina State right now. It's only sitting at -7. I've seen it at 7.5. I don't think either of those are accurate. NC State beat a bad UConn football program by 10 points, and what we've seen out of Notre Dame, I just think they're going to handle North Carolina State this week. So I'd get that spread before it goes up, I guess is what I'm saying.
I tend to agree with your logic. However, you tried to apply the transitive effect last week because Hawaii played close on the road with Vanderbilt, and therefore you said, well, I like Hawaii money line to beat Stanford.
Yeah.
How'd that work out for you?
That one backfired a little bit.
You talked me into it too, so thanks.
You can't win them all. There's always going to be losses.
By the way, Corey wants to know why you were wearing the hoodie tonight.
It's cold in our house. I like to work in the hoodie.
Okay. I mean, it's hot outside. I know it's hot outside here. If you've got that air cranked up, maybe dial it down a little bit. The old electric bill wouldn't be so high. Just a little advice, a little tip.
Food for thought.
Do you want to, this is a good question, Brent. How bad is UConn though, really? I mean, they're better under
but their football program was on the verge of being shut down.
Yeah. And that's like, how far down did NC State play? How far up did UConn? Is UConn actually improving? That's what was kind of hard to figure out in watching that game last week. I mean, we know what Notre Dame has done. They have, socked a couple of teams, one worse, I think, than the other. But we've seen Notre Dame perform at a very high level. Figuring out which team, that I feel pretty confident though, like you're saying.
If
Notre Dame against
truly
NC
believe
State,
in what Notre Dame is going to accomplish this season and what they've shown so far, that -7 line is insulting, in my opinion.
It is a road game now. -7 on the road means
only a touchdown better than North Carolina State. I think you have bigger problems for the rest of the season.
Okay, well, I think everyone has circled this game since probably last year. As soon as last season ended, this was kind of the unofficial beginning to the season, I think a lot of people thought. So Notre Dame's got 2 games under their belt, having played very well, and they were able to show off a lot of depth in both of those games. And that's why I feel very confident about them going into this game. So, what's the best thing you saw on Saturday? That's what the whiteboard is all about today. I mean, why are we dancing around this right now? Just bust out the whiteboard and tell us what the best thing is you saw in Notre Dame's win over Tennessee State.
Yeah, so I'll give a little bit of background here, and then we'll get into three whiteboards that I have that I think kind of further back the best thing I saw this weekend. And I think this is going to be a kind of a fun segment going forward because it gives a good recap of, the best thing I saw from the weekend. It gives you my perspective and opinion. But, Notre Dame, first of all, getting their young guys experience is one of the best things I saw this weekend. And I think the reason why that's so important is because in games like Navy and Tennessee State, you can roll out 5 running backs, Rico Flores, Jadyn Greathouse, all of the young guys, and get them experience, because it's clear that Marcus Freeman wants these guys to have an impact down the road, but you get them comfortable by inserting them in games like this and getting them experience like this, because down the road, later in the season, you want your best athletes on the field as much as possible. So that's the first best thing I saw this weekend, is just the great experience that a lot of these young guys are getting, because it's going to have them prepared for higher leverage, higher stake games going forward.
Concur. And Michael Johnson saying Tennessee State played a lot of two deep safety. And in last week's whiteboard, you showed us what their defense would look like. And what did you tell us about Notre Dame in the passing game? You said that it would be probably difficult for Notre Dame to be able to take some deep shots against Tennessee State, I believe.
Yeah. So in last week's Thursday whiteboard, I kind of gave a brief overview of the pros and cons of a 4-2-5 defense, and that's going to show up here in my whiteboard in a little bit. But the primary focus in a 4-2-5 defense is that it's a bend, don't break defense. They have 6 guys in the box so they can cover the run game, and then they have 5 guys in coverage, essentially, with a rover that plays, linebacker / coverage, depending on the play. And what you're going to see is a lot of cover 4, a lot of cover 2, and you don't have the opportunity to take deep shots on this defense. And so what Notre Dame needed to do, and what they did, is they got in a lot of trips looks. Maybe that was wide receiver, tight end trips looks. Maybe that was 3 wide receivers trip looks. Maybe that was spread out. Maybe that was in bunch. But what they needed to do was take advantage of screens and plays over the middle, or like 5-yard curl routes, 10-yard curl routes, a lot of intermediate routes, because the deep stuff wasn't going to be there. And that's just the backbone of the 4-2-5 defense.
All right. You're kind of toying with everybody's emotions right now. They came here for whiteboard and they want whiteboard. So are you going to bring out whiteboard or not?
Yes. Let me, this is an important sequence. So I got to make sure I get the first one right. So you let me know when we're on the screen.
There you go. It's up. It's ready.
All right. So
you might want to zoom out just a shade, because we're missing a little bit of the offensive backfield on screen right now. I don't know what you can see.
Oh, yep. Give me 1 second here. It gives me there. Does that fix it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So going into the second best thing I saw this weekend is the Notre Dame offense absolutely abused the Tennessee State linebackers. And if they were going to be successful, that's what they had to do. You have to attack the side away from the Sam or the rover. And the Sam is going to be on the strong side of the formation, or the passing strength of the formation. So in all these plays, I will highlight the rover and kind of explain what they did to abuse the will linebacker, this linebacker over here. So blue circle is the rover. And again, he's lined up to the passing strength of the field. And then obviously the will is going to be the weak side backer. And so this play was, I believe, either 1st and 10 or this is 1st and 10, Notre Dame's first drive. Ball's on the 36-yard line. Notre Dame is in 12 personnel right now, 2 tight ends on the field. Sam Hartman's under center. He's got a running back behind him, and then he's got 2 wide receivers split out on either side of him, and the ball is at the middle of the field. So this play is important because it's a setup play. It's a sequence play. So what happens on this play is Hartman play action, and the play action is directly at the will linebacker. And Sam Hartman tries to roll out. Nothing is there. And he gets tackled for at the line of scrimmage, essentially. It's that play right on the sideline where it's play action and he hands it off. And again, Notre Dame was trying to, I think, attack too deep downfield, and there simply wasn't enough there. They had 3 guys running routes on 4 defensive backs, so nothing was there. Sam Hartman rolls out. He gets hit on the sideline. And immediately, and why this play is important is because the rover, or the strong side linebacker in this play, he has to come down here and make a one-on-one tackle with Sam Hartman. Do you remember this play?
Yeah, vaguely, but yeah.
So as they're lining up for the next play, this guy that just made the tackle on Sam Hartman is given a tap on the top of his helmet. And what that usually means is, I need a blow.
Right.
I'm
tapping
gassed.
out. Yeah.
I need to get out of here. And so I think Notre Dame notices this. And then this is going to lead me to my next play. Let me present this one for you.
Okay.
So we can get it up on the field. This is second. Oh, no, wrong play. Sorry. Let me get the right one. The very next play is 2nd and 10 from the same yard line. And this time we have ball on the right hash, trips to the field side, so the left side of the field. And do you notice here how far out this trips is spaced? The number 3 wide receiver is on the line of scrimmage. The number 1 wide receiver is on the numbers. And then the 2 wide receiver is basically splitting the difference. Notre Dame is in 11 personnel out of shotgun. So they have the tight end to the boundary side of the field, and then they have the running back to the field side of the field. So technically, Notre Dame right now has 4 kind of passing attacks to the field side. So that's going to be the passing strength. So again, if I highlight the rover, in this case, the rover is going to be this guy, because again, he is the field side, passing strength. And then the Sam linebacker is going to be, the will linebacker is going to be into the boundary, because again, it's set away from the passing strength. And I told you last play, the guy that had to chase down Sam Hartman and he's asking for a blow. Well, now he's playing Mike linebacker, because I think they've got into a more passing down. It's 2nd and 10. They substituted out their traditional Mike linebackers. So technically they have kind of three linebackers who are more geared for the run in this case. But this guy right here is the guy who asked for the blow. So Notre Dame knows this guy is tired. They can see that from the box. So what do? They run, again, they attack the will side of the field. All of their linemen block down. They pull both of their guards into the boundary, and then they allow their left tackle here to release up to the safety. And so basically what you have is you have a right guard on a linebacker, you have a left guard on a linebacker, and then you have the left tackle sealing off the safety. All the running back has to do is make one guy miss. And when these linebackers are so tired because they have to play run and pass, right? Sam Hartman just made this guy read play action and then roll all the way out to the sideline and tackle him. He's gassed. So what Notre Dame does is they bring their guards right at these tired linebackers. And Jeremiah Love just does his thing. He makes one guy miss, and he scored a touchdown. But again, this is because they abused these linebackers. They gassed these linebackers the entire game. They made them play the run, and then they also made them play the pass on the perimeter. And it showed, because these guys were tired. And the last thing you want as a tired linebacker is 2 guards pulling at you in the run game.
Yeah, no kidding.
So that sequence, even though it didn't look like a big deal, right? Because Sam Hartman got tackled for a no gain on a play action rollout pass. Well, that still manipulated these linebackers and gassed them out. And then on the next play, when you bring 2 pulling guards at them, it's pretty much game over. So that was one of the best things I saw this weekend. Just that sequence of them abusing those linebackers in the pass and run game, and just really making them, worn out. And that's ultimately what won them the game. And again, when you can spread out these wide receivers with the trips, I mean, you're essentially making this half the field, right? Like, again, these guards only have to worry about, 2 linebackers, and the rest of these offensive linemen are down blocking on these defensive linemen. Jeremiah Love just has one guy to miss, and he's walking into the end zone, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah. I love it. I think that just so far we've seen more manipulation, like you've talked about, with how they line up personnel to give themselves better advantages, just like you're talking about right there. You put 3 receivers on the other side of the field to the field side of the field, and then you run into the boundary where you have fewer guys to have to account for, and boom, your fastest guy on the field at the time scores a touchdown.
Yeah, and that's why it's so significant that Notre Dame has a five running back rotation. Is the linebackers are gassed, but these running backs are coming in with fresh legs, play after play after play, and that's just so important in this offense. And then there was one last play I wanted to get into. So that scored Notre Dame's first touchdown, and then this play was the touchdown, the second touchdown that Sam Hartman did his little flip into the end zone. And again, I want to go over this play because what do we have again? We have another variation.
Why don't you blow this one up a little bit? I think you've got some room. You can make this. There you go.
So Notre Dame is in what would be considered 11 personnel right now. So one tight end and one running back. They got two wide receivers. The ball's on the left hash. They got two wide receivers to the field side and then the tight end to the field side. So that's just a variation of trips. And then you have a single wide receiver to the boundary, and then your running back is also on the field side. So you have four kind of, skill position players into the field right now. And again, this play absolutely abuses the linebackers. This was an RPO look. Sam Hartman, and for the people that are watching live right now, it's going to be easier because I telestrated with different colors basically who's accounting for who. And so this is an RPO look. Sam Hartman fakes the dive to Audric Estime, and then the corresponding linebacker to the field side has to step up, right? And so those two guys have essentially taken each other out. And in this case, the tight end is coming across the formation in the RPO look. You don't know if he's going to be a lead blocker or is he going to flare out into the flat for some sort of pass. In this case, the tight end decoys as a blocker and occupies the boundary side linebacker and the boundary side defensive back. So he takes out two players without having to do essentially anything. So what does that leave? That leaves Sam Hartman one-on-one with a backside linebacker that has to scrape over the top. You saw Sam Hartman make that guy miss. He jumps into the end zone, and that's an easy touchdown just because of how they were able to manipulate the linebackers once again. And Audric Estime takes out this linebacker. The tight end occupies the boundary side linebacker and the defensive back. And now you have, again, one linebacker or safety, in this case, the rover, that has to scrape entirely over the formation and try to make a tackle on Sam Hartman. And we saw what happened. So, again, Notre Dame achieved significantly by abusing these linebackers all day long because, Notre Dame has a physical offensive line and running back. So, they have to, respect that physicality in the run game. Okay, well, if you're going to do that, then we're going to make you have to, flare out and be a coverage linebacker as well. So that was the best thing I saw. Just Notre Dame manipulating those linebackers in a 4-2-5 defense all game long.
Love it. Good stuff. A couple questions before we move on. Someone wants to know, what's the hat? You got some love for the hat going on.
Yeah, this is just an all black Notre Dame hat with a shamrock on it. Pretty simple. Can't remember where I found it. But it was it's one of my favorites, because you can wear black with just about anything.
Yeah. Go Irish. Thanks for the super chat. He says, Jesse, thanks for the whiteboards. He learned so much. Maybe in the off season you can do some dedicated 101 videos.
Thanks, Go Irish. I appreciate that. It's funny, after every whiteboard, I always walk away feeling like, did I make things more confusing? Did I over-explain? Did I under-explain? I never know if I hit it on the mark, but I appreciate it. And Michael Parks brings up my favorite part of that Jeremiah Love touchdown run. Just seeing Big Joe Alt run down the field to the third level and get in the way of a defensive back was something good to see on that play, because he didn't have to block him. He just had to get in the way of him. But he releases immediately, and he gets like 10, 15 yards down the field untouched, and he just walls off that safety. So I thought
that's someone you wouldn't want to see running full speed at you either.
No, it's like seeing Zach Martin pull in the run game as well. I wouldn't, especially as a defensive back, I would not be looking forward to that.
Michael says, can we appeal the fake targeting call? We touched on that extensively last night. Fortunately for Antonio Carter, it at least occurred in the first half, which means that all he had to do was sit the second half. So suspension, whatever, he doesn't have to miss any time this week. He just had to sit the second half of last week. So whatever. And Marcus Freeman said yesterday that he agreed with the call, that because he led with the crown of his helmet, that's why it was called targeting. So
I just to get off of a best thing I saw. Well, worst thing I saw this weekend was the botching of those plays, because I don't care if you're going to call the targeting on Notre Dame, which I don't think it was. I thought he led with the shoulder, and then the runner declared himself and lowered his helmet on his own. Completely different story. But you can't tell me that play is reviewable, but the hit on Devin Ford isn't reviewable. You have to, if you're going to review that one, you should have reviewed the Devin Ford one, because the Devin Ford one was more egregious, but somehow it wasn't reviewed and no targeting was called.
And what's ridiculous is while Devin Ford was, down prone on the field and being attended to by the training staff and the medical staff inside Notre Dame Stadium on the large video screen, whatever you want to call it, Jumbotron, whatever, they showed the hit multiple times which is basically telling the replay crew, look, this is a helmet-to-helmet hit. And the explanation that Marcus Freeman got was, well, he hit with his forehead, not the crown of his helmet. So that wasn't targeting. It's a helmet-to-helmet hit is still targeting. It does not have to be the crown of the helmet. It's just that if it is the crown of the helmet, in the case of Antonio Carter, then it automatically becomes targeting. But it still does not have to be the crown of the helmet. Helmet-to-helmet is still targeting. And the fact that they didn't even review it is just beyond ridiculous. So,
last worst thing I saw of the weekend, what was Eddie George doing with his quarterbacks? His starting quarterback opened the drive, went all the way down the field and got him a field goal. And then the next possession after the fumble, he's switching quarterbacks.
I know.
It gave me nightmares of Brian Kelly all over again. It's just, I don't understand that. A guy is hot. He just gave a great response drive to Notre Dame going down the field and punching in a touchdown on their opening drive. Tennessee State responds by putting some sort of points on the board, and then you just swap out your quarterback for no reason. Another worst thing I saw this weekend.
Yeah. Brent, said this earlier that Notre Dame has not been tested, and Brent says Notre Dame hasn't been tested yet. I mean, they've won by a combined 98-6. So I don't know if you're joking or if you're but they've won by a combined 98-6. Would you say they have really been tested yet, Jess?
I don't think that they've been tested yet. No, Tennessee State was not a test. I would say that
you can say that there's a test with the Navy option and all that stuff, but
yeah, I would say that the discipline required for Navy is a bit of a test. But outside of that, I don't necessarily see a true test for this team yet. And I think North Carolina State is, it's an introduction back into the Power Five. It's a noon kickoff on the road. There's just a lot of things that you have to do to be prepared for that game, for the circumstances that were just kind of outlined.
Brent says he's also temporarily moved from Monterey to the hills of Prunedale, and he's going to miss Campagnos. I don't blame you. I miss it already.
And it's crazy because Notre Dame's targeting call was directly from what was taught to them. Marcus Freeman gave a tackling demo on the Dan Patrick show, lead foot, lead shoulder. That's exactly what Carter did on that hit. And I still will go to the grave saying that he led with the shoulder, and that was the first thing that initiated contact. So if you're a coach for Notre Dame, I don't think you can be mad because he did what he was taught at the end of the day,
Yeah, I guess I don't disagree with that, but it is what it is. Have to move on again.
Luckily, it happened in the first half, so
exactly
we don't have to worry about it for NC State.
Yep, he won't have to miss any time against NC State because it happened in the first half against Tennessee State. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
We got a great interview in. We got a great whiteboard in. I think the only thing is to finish the show with a great rapid fire.
So, because of the extended holiday weekend, both the AP and coaches polls came out today on the same day. Usually they stagger them a little bit. Notre Dame is number 10 in the AP, number 11 in the coaches poll. Any disagreement with where Notre Dame is this week?
No, I don't really see a disagreement. And for anyone that follows me on Twitter, kind of went on a rant this morning, and I've said it before. I don't think there should be rankings until about a month of the season is over, but I understand why rankings are a thing. Notre Dame has played, kind of two inferior opponents that I don't think are, super challenging. But some teams lost in front of them kind of handily. And I think naturally, if you take care of your business, you're going to, move your way up. So as long as Notre Dame is winning, it really doesn't matter because the ranking will take care of itself at the end of the day as the season progresses.
Two top 10 teams lost. That's a little bit of a tongue twister that I wasn't expecting it to be. And they fell, LSU and Clemson, and we'll touch on them here in a minute. But as a result, Notre Dame has a couple of wins. They move up, and they'll continue to move up as long as they keep taking care of business. And back to the subject of whether or not it was a test, Brirish boy, he says that they haven't been quote unquote tested. However, what I really take away from these two games is lack of confusion, no turnovers due to getting plays or personnel onto the field.
Nope.
That's what's promising to me. Yeah, completely agree. And the only turnover they've committed so far was the hit on Devin Ford. I mean, when you're knocked almost unconscious and you have a concussion and the ball is jarred from you, and they should have, reviewed it for targeting, and they didn't. To me, you can kind of forgive that, but the offense has not turned the ball over. So yeah.
No pre-snap penalties.
Yeah, no stupid stuff. And that's what's been really impressive so far. Like for early in the season, for as much newness as there is for Notre Dame, there hasn't been a lot of confusion. They've been a really sharp, really on task, on point looking football team. So, and Facilitate says the 10 rank is generous, possibly, but I mean it's 10 and 11, and they have not just beaten these teams. Again, they beat them by a combined 98-6. So we're going to find out a lot more about this team really over the course of the next 3 weeks. So
I think
we've already seen where one team's top 10 ranking, or two teams really top 10 rankings weren't what they maybe should be. Huh?
Yeah, and I think going back to what, BR Irish Boy says, a thing that has tested them, or to me is, when Devin Ford got hit and they turned the ball over, those are things that are practiced, sudden changes. And what did Notre Dame do? They didn't mope. They didn't get, in their feelings. The defense stepped up, got the stop, and then the special teams blocked a field goal. To me, that's more important to how you respond to adversity or sudden changes or things that maybe should have went your way but didn't go your way, essentially.
Vince and I talked about that yesterday, that was really kind of the wake-up call. It was a pretty lethargic crowd up to that point inside the stadium. Each team had the ball at least once, I guess. Once. Each team had the ball once. Tennessee State's kicking off to Notre Dame for what would have been Notre Dame's second possession. And then after that, after they showed the replays up there on the screen and the fans got to see the hit that was not even reviewed, that really woke the crowd up and it fired up the defense, and they come up with the big stop in that situation. And really, obviously, Tennessee State only threatened one other time the entire game. So it was a little bit of a wake-up call, and they passed the test, I think. Now, as we look at the rest of this top 25, not a lot of really surprises. Georgia, Michigan, 1-2 in both polls. Florida State up to number 4 in the AP. They moved past Ohio State after that win over LSU. And Ohio State they struggled a little bit to get past Indiana. And then Colorado and Duke both join the polls this week after their upsets of TCU and Clemson. TCU falls out of the top 25. Clemson falls all the way from top 10 in both polls to number 21 in the coaches poll, number 25 in the AP. LSU falls 9 spots to number 14 in both polls. Do you think Clemson should still be ranked after that egg that they laid last night against Duke?
John Kristofik kind of beat you to the punch on
right
this
on
one.
Point. Yeah, I couldn't question out.
Here's the thing about Clemson, and again, going back to the root of this, from where they were ranked in the beginning of the season, I do believe that they still deserve to be ranked because it's just one opponent. It's the first game of the year, but that still doesn't take away from the blaring deficiencies that Clemson showed. They don't have Deshaun Watson or Trevor Lawrence at quarterback anymore. They don't have an elite defensive lineman and linebackers anymore. And so, if you listen to Paul Feinbaum, he's saying the Clemson dynasty is on the decline. It's pretty much over. I don't think I'd go so far to say that. I mean, their next two opponents are vastly easy. I think Clemson's, based on Clemson's schedule, at best they're going to be at 9-3, at worst maybe 8-4, somewhere in there. That's going to get you a top 25 ranking at the end of the year. So I think it's too early to jump ship and say that Clemson doesn't deserve to have a ranking. Now, if they continue this trend and their offense looks horrible and they keep turning the ball over, etc., then yeah, I do believe that they don't deserve to be ranked. But I mean, Clemson fumbled the ball on Duke's 1 yard line and 7 yard line last night. You get a minimum of 6 points out of that, maximum 14 points out of that. It's a much different game. I think they clean up a lot of things. But yeah, it's just too early for me to say that Clemson's not a top 25 team.
I do think they deserve to probably be ranked. I mean, they are largely ranked based on what they did last year. It's like three out of their last 4 they have lost now at this point. When you look at Clemson and LSU going back to last year, they've lost more games than they've won. How much carryover actually applies, I don't know. But like Clemson does still have a lot of 4- and 5-star talent. So I think against the ACC schedule, they're going to be okay. But they've got Florida State coming up here in a couple of weeks. And of course, they've got Notre Dame later on in the season. They've got some things to figure out here in the next couple of weeks before Florida State, and they'll have a lot to figure out before Notre Dame comes around. I just, what's watching them, like we talk about what Notre Dame has done so well, and there hasn't been a lot of mishaps and chaos and stuff like that. Clemson basically beat itself last night in that game. They actually moved the ball fairly well against Duke, and Duke is supposed to be the defensive-oriented team, but Clemson beat themselves last night. So, if you look, Notre Dame is obviously going to play both Duke and Clemson this season. After seeing them both last night, which game do you feel most differently about right now?
I would say, and we're talking about, LSU, Florida State, and Clemson and Duke here. The game I would feel more differently about is the LSU and Florida State game.
No. That's not what we're talking about. We're between Duke and Clemson. Which game do you feel most differently about?
I feel most
as a Notre Dame opponent. I
feel most differently about Duke because at the beginning of the season, I was afraid that Clemson would actually be, Notre Dame's biggest challenge, considering it was on the road. And what we've seen of Clemson in the past, I don't see Clemson as big of a threat. And at the beginning of the season, when we went through the schedule, both of us marked down Duke as a potential kind of trap game. And I think that is only intensified or heightened after what we saw Duke do, or after what we saw Duke do to Clemson yesterday evening. So I would say I feel more scared of Duke and less scared of Clemson at this point. I know that's easy to say just based off of one game, but I already thought Duke was going to be some sort of trap game. And I think that it's, again, only more of a trap game now after seeing what they did to Clemson.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people are talking about Riley Leonard, and he was okay last night. He still didn't complete a very high percentage of his passes in that game. He had the nice run for the touchdown, but again, so much of what Clemson did was self-inflicted. I still think Duke is going to be a challenge, but again, look at how everything unraveled in the second half. Clemson was moving the ball against that defense. Clemson basically, they botched a handoff that turned into a fumble. That wasn't necessarily Duke forcing the fumble. It was just a bad exchange, it looked like, with Clemson down there in the red zone. And even the interception, it was right off the Clemson receiver's hands and it pops up into the air. It's like tip drill out there for Duke. So, complete kudos to Mike Elko, because that is still a major milestone win for Duke to be able to knock off Clemson like that. I feel a little differently about Clemson because Clemson, I think, is in the situation that they are in because of the stubbornness of Dabo Swinney, with the fact that he doesn't want to embrace the transfer portal. He's still got a pretty high percentage of 4- and 5-star recruits on that team, but it's looking like everybody pretty much missed on Klubnik. Like, what he doesn't look like quarterback of the future for Clemson. But if Dabo Swinney even halfway embraces the transfer portal and he adds a couple of key pieces, I think that's a lot different looking Clemson team. And he goes out and he gets himself an offensive coordinator. He gets Lincoln Riley's brother Garrett to be his offensive coordinator, but they're still doing all the same stuff that they were doing. That it's kind of like, it sounds like the situation with, when Jared Parker was the offensive coordinator at West Virginia. He's just calling plays in somebody else's offense. It's not like he got to implement any of his own stuff. So I feel differently, I think more differently about Clemson. I still think Duke is going to be a good challenge, especially since Notre Dame has to go out there to Duke, but I'm not like my level of concern as of right now. Now that game is still a couple of months away, but as of right now, level of concern for me with Duke is less than what it was a couple of weeks ago. Fill in the blank. It means blank that Sam Hartman is 1-2 in his career against North Carolina State, including an 0-2 record at NC State.
It means nothing that Sam Hartman is 1-2 against NC State and 0-2 at NC State, just simply because it's not just Sam Hartman. It's the roster around him and the deficiencies for, a lack of offensive line, running game, whatever it might be, isn't for Sam Hartman to shoulder. And so, being in a different team with a better, skill set of players around him and offensive line and the threat of a really good running game, I think that Sam Hartman is going to have no issues playing against North Carolina State this year. It's just not an apples to apples comparison for me. But unfortunately, football being the sport it is, the quarterback gets a lot of the blame and the losses. So I think he's going to very easily and successfully reverse that trend and get his first win at North Carolina State this season.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at Hartman's numbers, he's played NC State 3 times. Again, twice at NC State, lost both. He's completed 55% of his passes, 6 touchdowns, 6 career interceptions against the Wolfpack. And the 2 losses at NC State, sacked a total of 10 times. And as we all know, Wake Forest did not have near the offensive line that Sam Hartman has here at Notre Dame. He didn't have near the running game to lean on. He didn't have really overall the kind of receivers that he's got here at Notre Dame, the weapons around him, and he's playing in a different system as well. Like, you can look and say, well, Tony Gibson's been there since 2019, and it's been his defense that Hartman has faced. But again, it's been a completely different system and a completely different group of guys around him. And like Marcus Freeman was asked about it yesterday, like, well, do you talk to Sam Hartman about his experience against NC State just in terms of the lack of production that he's had? And Freeman was like, it hasn't come up at all because it, as you started with, Jess, it doesn't matter now because there's so many different variables around Hartman, and it begins and ends with the fact that he's got a completely different team around him, and he's working in a different offensive system than what he had at Wake Forest. So I agree. I don't think it means anything going in other than the fact that he's seen this defense a few times. And just as we've seen, the experience that Sam Hartman has had in his previous 5 years has meant a lot to what he's been able to do in year 6 so far.
Yeah, and essentially too, it's like Sam Hartman could be frustrated with the fact that, maybe he sees how to beat the defense, but his players or, play calling aren't necessarily getting to where they're supposed to beat those. And so that's not really something in Sam Hartman's control. And I think facilitate inform brings up a kind of, a good rebuttal is, the lack of success could be a thing, and those things could get in your head. I think that's the only thing that potentially could be, a factor for Sam Hartman. But I think Sam Hartman is such a competitor and such, so much preparation goes into his game and his skill set that I don't think it's necessarily in his head. And I think it's more so the reverse. I think he might have, maybe not a vendetta, but, a personal grudge match of, knowing what he's done against North Carolina State and wanting to kind of reverse that trend a little bit.
Tyler, thank you for the super chat. Didn't slip this in. He says, would you rather be an LSU or Clemson fan today?
This kind of goes along with the question we had coming up here in a little bit, but I would say I would rather be an LSU fan. And I'll keep it short and simple on this one. I think that Jayden Daniels is far more dynamic than Klubnik, and that would give me a lot of things to be excited about. And I think that really what screwed LSU was the play calling, and that falls on the shoulder of the head coach, and not knowing, situation, when to take points and when to, get off the field, etc. So I think what really outdid LSU was their coaching and play calling.
I agree. And, look, some of the national guys are talking about Notre Dame fans and how Notre Dame is jumping on Brian Kelly. Look, Notre Dame fans don't like Brian Kelly. I don't know what there is to be misunderstood about that. That's why Notre Dame fans are jumping on Brian Kelly. It's not a jealousy thing. It is, it's
they've
that
seen
has
the
nothing
trend
to do with it. Yeah. Like a lot of people here in this town around don't like Brian Kelly, and the way he left did nothing to help that. That's the long and the short of it. As to the question itself, who would you rather be? I think I'd still rather probably be an LSU fan. I think that there is, look, just what you said. They've still got a good quarterback if Kelly doesn't end up ruining him with year 2 regression like we've seen before. But I think that this season is going to mean a lot more for Clemson's future than it is for LSU's future. Again, like when you look at the way Dabo does things, unless he is willing to be a little bit more introspective and say, am I going to change some things about how I go about my business here going forward? I think that this season's
Dabo's running
an
offense like Lawrence is still quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Of these teams that won this weekend, Colorado, Florida State, and Duke, who are you most confident in, and who are you least confident in going forward this season?
This is a tough question because I'm confident in a lot of these teams, and for a multitude of different reasons. I think Florida State played a good game. I think they had the advantage of playing at home in a week 1 game, right? Like week 1 games with 2 top 10 opponents is going to look drastically different than if 2 top 10 opponents play the last game of the season. So I don't take a ton away from it, especially considering Florida State had the home field advantage. I think that they did better than what I expected, but I just still feel like LSU shot themselves in the foot a lot during that game, and that ultimately had a big sway on the game. So again, if they played this game later in the season, I think it'd be much closer, and I think LSU would probably beat them if they had to play again. So, I'm not sold on Florida State yet. Colorado, I think that they ultimately won the weekend because no one expected, Deion Sanders to go out there and company to beat TCU except everyone in that locker room, right? And
do you believe, Jesse? Do you believe?
Was TCU a JV defense? Did they have a lot of roster turnover? Yes, both of those things are true, but Deion Sanders matched the same amount of wins that Colorado had last year in the first week of the season. I think
against the playoff team.
Against a playoff team that was ranked. I think there's a lot to be said about that. Whether you like Deion, whether you believe in them, there's a lot to be said about that in general. And I think Duke beat up on a team that, again, is going through turbulence, and they don't know how to navigate that turbulence quite yet. They don't have a star quarterback. They don't have stud defensive linemen. And when you throw in turnovers in that game, it's going to get very sloppy. So did Duke play well? Yeah, but Clemson also played horrible and didn't want to adjust. So ultimately, I think I feel the best about Colorado coming out of this weekend, so much so that I took Colorado's over on 5.5 wins at plus 150 as a result of their victory this weekend.
Nice. I like it. I tell you what, Duke should be 4-0 when they play Notre Dame September 30th, the week after Notre Dame plays Ohio State. That shapes up because of where it falls on the schedule. That does kind of shape it up to make it quite a bit more interesting from a Notre Dame standpoint. But they also still have Florida State. They have NC State and North Carolina. But, again, there can be some pitfalls. There can be some ups and downs for Duke along the way. They had all off season to prepare for Clemson, and they really didn't see a Clemson team go off script. Again, like when you look at Clemson and their offense, hey, maybe it wasn't DJ Uiagalelei's fault. There were still some issues with that offense. Again, even though they moved the ball last night, but there were some other issues last night. Colorado, they're definitely the most intriguing, interesting team coming out of this.
They have the least amount of expectations.
Right. And then, you've got a quarterback with over 500 yards, and you've got, like I think Brent earlier was saying, wouldn't it be nice to have Dylan Edwards right now as part of that backfield? Well, sure, especially when you see him go for 4 touchdowns. But
Dylan Edwards only gets that opportunity because of the roster turnover at Colorado.
Yes, he's getting opportunities because they swiped him away from Notre Dame. And because of just what you said, there was a lot of roster turnover out there. That's why a lot of these guys are getting some opportunities. But Colorado is still going to play. They've got Oregon and USC both this month. We're probably going to see some more Colorado in primetime coming up here within the next few weeks, just based on this.
But Colorado is going to go into that Oregon and USC stretch 3-0. They're beating Nebraska and Colorado State.
Right. But then they have UCLA, they have Oregon State, Utah. My point is, Colorado is not going to have an easy schedule the rest of the way. So we'll find out. They're the most intriguing anyway, but in terms of confidence, I don't know. I think I am least confident in them just because of the schedule that they have to play compared to the other two. I think that they're probably going to score some points and they'll be entertaining because Deion is there. But I am most confident in Florida State because that program looks like it has come together, and they also have a veteran quarterback. They've got Clemson coming up again, just in a couple of weeks, and they've got Duke. And then really after that, Miami and Florida are their 2 toughest games. So I am most confident in Florida State when I look at who they're playing and what they have and, just the way the whole thing looks. I think that there are going to be some ups and downs still for Colorado and Duke, not as many potentially for Florida State because of the way their schedule shapes up. And again, Mike Norvell, where he is in terms of program building and what he's got on the roster, it looks a lot different now than it looked just a couple of years ago.
I kind of want to get a segue question and get your opinion on some things. Because to me, there's a lot of chatter still about Colorado. They're not going to be able to sustain this. They're going to get tired, They got a lot of young guys. They got a lot of hungry guys. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is Deion has them mentally prepared by what he's saying to them or instilling in them. So I guess my question would be, are you on board or are you against with how Deion Sanders is handling everyone's perspective of Colorado football and what came from the TCU or from them beating, TCU? Do you like the way that he speaks in the post-game press conference? Do you like the way that he speaks on the field to reporters at halftime? I guess, what is your overall thoughts on that?
John says the Colorado defense can't stop anybody.
Yeah, but we've seen Oklahoma do that for years.
It's going to be my point. Colorado is going to fit in just nicely when they join the Big 12 next year. That's my point. So Vince and I, we talked a little about Deion last night, and since you brought it up, the way he talked in the post game, we might as well just go ahead and play it again right now.
Oh, what's up, boss? You believe that? You hold on. Oh no. Do you believe that? Huh? Oh no. I read through that bull junk you wrote down. I read through that. I sifted through all that. Yeah. Oh no. Come on. Do you believe? You don't believe. You just answered it. You don't believe. Next question.
I think it's a little bit much. He is entertaining. I'll give him that. And for the media around Colorado, obviously, he has rabbit ears. And for the media who cover the Colorado Buffaloes, you obviously have to be a believer to get a question answered at a press conference. It looks like when you're working, with Deion Sanders. So, again, like, it's entertaining. I'm glad that I am out here from 30,000 feet away and we can kind of watch the Deion show. I think it would be a little bit much to be there on a daily basis, personally. I mean, his team is bought in, obviously.
Okay, so that's I guess
that's the most important thing, I think. I just don't need all, I think what he was talking to Ed Werder there, and I think the thing that set Deion off about Ed Werder is Ed Werder said something to the effect on Twitter over the summer or at some point after Deion was hired, that he's a celebrity coach. I have never thought that, because look at what he was willing to go to Jackson State at obviously a small FCS HBCU school. He was willing to go to Jackson State because he wasn't getting other opportunities. He was willing, somewhat similar to Jim Harbaugh when he started off at San Diego. He went off the beaten path, was willing to prove himself that he could be a head coach, build a program, put it together. Deion is working within the parameters of the system. Anybody else could have done exactly what Deion did last year as a head coach and turned the roster over the way he did. He caught a lot of backlash for it. And I think because of the fact all anybody wanted to fixate on was the numbers. You had all this turnover on your roster, 51 transfers coming in, I think it was, and all these freshmen, 20-plus freshmen coming in. Anyone who was a new head coach could have done exactly what Deion did. He chose to do it his way, and at least for one game anyway, he's proved that it's successful. Now, can he do it over the long term? That's TBD. But at least for now, he's doing it. But it's a little bit much for my liking, with all the noise. Like, can you just answer because, like, what came after that response? Like, they completely shut Ed Werder down, and I don't think they ever let Ed Werder ask a question, because Ed apparently wasn't a believer enough for Deion to get, to be able to get a question at the press conference.
Yeah. So I agree with a lot of stuff you said. And I think what makes a lot of people uncomfortable is Deion is doing it the Deion way, like he always has. And that looks different. Deion does things kind of authentically, one of one. You don't see a lot of people do the same things that Deion does. So I think first and foremost, that is a big factor. And then I think secondly, like you were saying, I think it is a bit too much. And especially for the people on the inside, it's got to be definitely too much, because the people on the outside, like us, being able to talk about it, and we're borderline, is it too much? Is it not too much? I think, yeah, on the inside, it's too much. But here's what I'll say, and this will kind of be my closing statement, is if he's got his players buying in and developing a mentality that if no one is going to believe in us and we believe in us and we go out and execute and play how we know, we can play, and it results in victories, I think it's okay, because again, he's getting his players to play at their best, and he's getting their players to buy into what they're selling. And, when the game is over, if that's too much, sure, you can turn it off. You don't have to listen to the press conference or whatever. But I look more so on the field and what he's been able to do in the first game for, again, a team that won one game last year. They've already matched their victories this season, and it's all because he built a philosophy for these players to buy into, and they play hard for him. And so at the end of the day, that's all I really have to say is it's too much probably for, the media and everyone on the outside. But when it comes down to X's and O's and playing and getting his players to play the best that they can, I think he's tremendous at that.
He obviously has, but again, like it's one thing to get the players to believe in what they're doing, and look, they scored a lot of points out there, right? Like they did a lot of things really well. Again, like for as much roster turnover as they had, they didn't look like a team that just was sort of thrown together in one offseason. That's not what they look like. But there's a difference between getting your team to believe and requiring that the people who are covering your team believe.
Right, and that's where I draw the line.
That was just a lot of nonsense.
Right, 100%.
So what about Travis Hunter, their two-way guy, who, of course, was the number one guy in the nation a few years ago. He had committed to Florida State. Deion got him to go to Jackson State. Now he has followed him to Colorado as well. He played both ways for Colorado, 100 snaps as a receiver and a defensive back. Michael commented here a little bit ago that they'll run out of gas by mid-October. The kid who played 100-plus snaps won't get to October playing that much. So what do you think he did? What do you think of that?
I think what Travis Hunter did by playing 100 snaps combined at wide receiver and defensive back against TCU is absolutely insane. And I think it's a credit to his discipline, his skill, and his conditioning. Not everyone can do that. And I think it needs to be applauded because, at the end of the day, Colorado has to do what it has to do to put the best players on the field at all times. And they've determined that having someone out there like Hunter is going to give them the best chance. And I think the best comparison I can give is he is the Shohei Ohtani of college football at the moment. And you can't knock a guy for wanting to have so much drive and competitiveness to go out there and play both ways. And it would be one thing if, it looked like he was taking a break or taking a blow, or, his wide receiver game lacked or his defensive back game lacked. The man played like 50 snaps and then jumped a goal line route, all right? He's not tired. He's got the juice to be out there playing both ways. And to me, it's just tremendous. I love it, and I hope he can continue to do it the entire season.
11 catches for 119 yards, and then he had an interception as a defensive back as well. And oh, by the way, it was 105 degrees there in Fort Worth where they were playing that game, and he played 100 snaps. That is what's insane to me. Like the heat and the fact that he's able to go out there and play 100 snaps. They had to have been hooking him up to an IV at halftime.
At special teams, the rare special teams break he got too.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sitting here and I am looking at the current Heisman odds, and I am shocked that Travis Hunter he's not even showing up in the top. There he is. He's got plus 6,000 odds right now to win the Heisman. He looks like he's probably about the 15th or 16th best odds right now. Like, I don't care what Colorado's record ends up being. If Travis Hunter is able to go out there week in and week out and produce even close to what he did in that first game for Colorado, he's got to end up being, very highly considered for the Heisman at the end of the season.
I don't know how you couldn't, because again, it's like the Shohei Ohtani of college football. If you have a guy who's effective on both sides of the ball, how can it not be, right? Because you're playing double the positions, you're doing double the output, and you're elite on both sides of the ball.
I mean, this is how non-quarterbacks win Heisman trophies, if you're able to do double duty like this and do it at a high level. Now, I'll be really curious to see. Deion obviously is a guy who did it both ways, and he played multiple sports and the whole thing. So, like, if you're going to have a head coach who's in your corner, that's it. But just at least for week one, for what Travis Hunter did, it was pretty amazing. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up with that. And, and Chi-Town says you're right. Pre-70s, it was pretty normal, but it is very rare right now. You just don't see guys playing two ways. Very few and far between that you see it. We're going to wrap it up with that tonight. Jesse will have more Whiteboard on Thursday's show, and we'll, of course, have plenty more this week as we go on, as we get ready for Notre Dame and North Carolina State. We'll delve more into the Wolfpack on tomorrow's show. Be sure to hit the like button on your way out. We appreciate you being here today. Subscribe, rate, and review as well. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.